Hello, welcome to Shad Life. If you're wondering what bike this is behind me, this is John's bike. And if you've been following my channel recently, he had a big crash, broke his collarbone. And I want to talk about some things. John and we were trying to figure out how he crashed, because if you see the crash, he's not doing anything really extreme. He's going over some rollers, diving into a berm and stuff, but he was unfamiliar with the trail. So I'm going to talk a little bit, actually I'm going to talk a lot of bit about bike geometry, because I recently tested a medium Esker Smoky, and that front end was too long for me. Even though I'm within what they recommend for the size, it was too long for me. And this isn't only an Esker thing. This is a bike industry thing. And this is the bike that was recommended for John. And it's only 5 millimeters shorter than the Smoky. And I'm talking about reach here. So 460 here, the Smoky's 465. For a size medium, and for somebody that's 5'7", and John's right in there, he's 5'7", 5'8", somewhere like that. That's a long front end. That's a really long front end. And I do not, and I'm going to just say it right now, I do not like this bike industry trend of keep putting us on these longer and longer front ends. I've been talking about this for a while. And after probably, 2 years now of experimentation with different bikes and different sizes, where I really kind of learned about the bike being too big for me or too long for me was when I bought an Ibis Ripmo AF when they first kind of came out with that bike. And they recommended a medium for me, and it had 29-inch wheels and stuff. I would have rather had a small. I would have had way more fun on a small, way more control over the bike, all of that stuff. And I felt, I use these terms, I felt like a passenger on that bike. There were a couple times where we were out riding, both out west at Trestle Bike Park and then in Cuyuna on their new Sledgehammer trail, where I was not comfortable doing some things on that bike that I probably would have been more comfortable doing on a shorter reach bike, and a bike that fit me better. So this video is going to get a little long because I'm going to get into some pretty nitty gritty detail. So I'm going to define these terms for you before I get into the video, because I'm going to talk about them. But for those of you, looking into getting a new bike, you're used to a certain bike, or if you're new to mountain biking, things like that. And if you are in the bike industry and you're watching this video, I really want you to pay attention, because you're taking people down a very bad and dangerous path, I believe. So the terms I'm going to talk about is being a pilot or a passenger. So by pilot, I mean you are in control. You are the pilot of the bike. You have control over the bike. You can make it do what you want it to do. Passenger is when the bike is in control and you don't have as much control over it. It's going to do what it's going to do, and your ability to correct it and make changes is much more difficult. And then I'm going to talk about a third thing, and I believe I have not heard this out there, so I believe I'm the first one to probably bring this up. And I won't be surprised if other YouTube channels start using this term. I'm going to call it yank factor. Right? Now, what is yank factor? Yank factor is how much does the bike yank you forward, and how often do you get at that full arm extension and it yanks you forward to where your body starts to move forward. So we're going to talk about that, because that's a really important thing to understand, and why I'm really struggling with this super long reach that the bike industry is trying to get us into. Again, now we're talking size specific. If you're maybe 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot, I feel like this bike would be great. But when you're 5'7", like me, or 5'8", maybe even 5'9", I'd say you're more between, then I feel like this is getting too long for you. The yank factor is getting to be too much. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get on this bike and talk about it, and then I'm going to go grab my Smoky. And if you've been following my channel, I downsized the Smoky. The medium was way too big. I love Esker products. I've had a few of them, and they're great. I do think that the Smoky medium does not fit somebody who's 5'7", though. And I think they're just following what the rest of the bike industry is doing. I highly recommend the bike industry start changing its sizing numbers. And that's going to be mainly what this video is about. And I'm going to bring the Smoky, and it's a size small now, and that's got a 430 millimeter reach. So 30 millimeters difference between this bike and the Smoky. And I'll show you kind of a few things on the bike. So let's get to it. This might have some screen tilting. We'll see. Okay, so what is the yank factor? I described it a little bit, but I want to show you on the bike. So I'm going to stand up, and I'm nice, I'm in that attack position, right? So if I'm start to go downhill, and so we're going to tilt the camera here and show me going downhill, I have to get back here, right? Well, how far can I get back? My arms start to get fully extended. My elbows are no longer bent, right? Well, at this point, I can no longer like push the front end any further forward. The bike is now pulling me. Now, here's what happens if the front end drops suddenly. Let's just say I'm going off a jump and maybe the back end kicked a little bit and the front end drops and I'm already in this position, right? Or if I'm going downhill and the front end drops off of a little drop or a rock or something, right? So here we go. The front end drops. I get yanked forward, right? So let's level me back up, right? And so why did I get yanked forward there? Well, because my arms are fully extended. My elbows are no longer bent at that point. And so once there's no room for my arms to do this and allow the bike to just drop without my body moving forward. But once my arms are fully extended, when the front end drops, it pulls your body forward. Well, the moment your body gets pulled forward, now you have all this momentum, your body weight plus your bike and everything wanting to go forward. And that's what causes over the bars or causes all kinds of bad things to happen. So longer bikes are going to have more yank factor to them. And when they start to get too long, you start to just be the passenger and at the mercy of the bike, right? So let's go ahead and get in that downhill again, right? Yeah, so how far can I get back on this bike? Because the front end is so long, right? My elbows are at their max. So at this point, if that front end dives down at all, I'm doomed. My whole body is going to get yanked forward. And that's why I call it the yank factor. My arms are going to yank me forward. You see it all the time in videos. Watch closely on these, whatever they call them, Friday crash videos or whatever. But Friday fails, I think they call them. But yeah, you get yanked forward. And then we're going to go back to level here. And once you get yanked forward, you're now at the mercy of momentum and gravity and everything throwing you forward. Your weight is no longer where you need it to be to keep the back wheel down, all that stuff. So I'm going to go grab the Smoky in size small, 30 millimeters less reach, and we'll see a little bit how different that is. And then I'll talk about kind of how I could change this bike a little bit to give less of a yank factor, but it still isn't perfect. It's kind of like a fix when you should have just got the right size frame. All right, let's go grab the other bike. Okay, so the Esker Smoky, size small, 430 millimeter reach. I know I've repeated myself on that a bunch, but I just want to make sure you know. And that bike over there, it's off camera, but it's sitting right there. It's a orange Crush in size medium, 460 millimeter reach. So there's only a 30 millimeter difference, but I immediately feel more compact on this bike. And I think that's what happens with some people and I was just talking to a rider yesterday. He likes the stretched out feel. Well, he likes the stretched out feel when he's seated and pedaling around. Like he likes this like stretched out feel, and there's a lot of people that like that. The problem is if you like that stretched out feel for when you're seated and pedaling around, the moment you get out of the saddle, you're too stretched out. You're no longer that much control of the bike, and you're more the passenger than you are the pilot. The moment I'm standing, I feel spot on. Like the handlebars are way closer in for me and in a way more comfortable position. So we're going to go ahead and tilt the screen, and we'll see how far back I can go before my arms like fully lock out. So I'm going to get in that attack position. Let's start pointing downhill. My elbows are still bent. I got a sweatshirt on here, and I'm way back there. Like I know the screen's tilted, but I'm actually on flat ground and I'm like having a hard time here. It's almost like I'm about ready to manual, but I'm way back there, way further and more comfortable. Like my elbows are still bent. There's, see, that's a problem. There's my arms at full extent. It's a pretty significant difference. You wouldn't think 30 millimeters would make that big of a difference. All right, my legs are stressing out. Let's come back to level again. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about, is I'm able to get my weight further back while still having room in my elbows to accommodate for front wheel movement. So on this bike, we're going to go ahead and do that yank thing again, right? So on this bike, we're going to go ahead, I'll stand up, we'll go ahead and tilt the screen so I'm pointing downhill. Kind of that same position, right, that I was on the other bike. Now, what happens when the bike suddenly pitches forward on me right now? I have arm movement. I'm not getting yanked forward. I can move my arms to accommodate that extra front end dive, right? Okay, so I'm going to come back up. We're going to level off. So I hope that makes sense. That's what I'm talking about with yank factor. So for the last 2, maybe 3 years, I've seen more people crashing going off of drops, going over jumps, things like that. And they're going off, whether it's a drop would be level, and their front end is diving on them, and they're doing this kind of nose manual over the bars sometimes, whatever. Over the bars is really, really, really bad. Or a jump where they go off, and because the front of the bike is longer, you actually have to pull harder to keep that front end up longer when you go off a jump. And then if you don't pull hard enough, your back wheel will kick on you. And then the front end extends, and then they go because they get yanked, and then their whole body starts to go forward. The idea is you want movement of the bike pitch control, I call it. It always fits in with my whole like pilot passenger thing, because if you ever talk to a pilot, they do talk about pitch. And you want to be able to pitch the bike forward, bring the bike back, things like this. Well, if your arms are at their full limit, you can only pitch so far. So you need the bike to be fit in such a way that gives you a lot of fore and aft pitch control movement without your upper body having to go forward or back as much. That is what I'm calling yank factor. And I think the bike industry needs to understand this, because they keep making the front end too long, much longer. They keep going longer. They keep going slacker with the head angles, all this stuff. When I feel like, you know, for taller riders, great. For shorter riders, they really need to bring that front end back. So I'm going to talk about my ideal reach at my height, right? And so at 5'7", I've found 420. It's about as short as I want to go, so that my Esker Tie Hey Duke is 420 millimeter reach. If I remember correctly, this bike is 430 millimeter reach, and my Canyon Spectral 125 is 435 millimeter reach. 435, even when I bought that bike, that's a size small, and 435 is pretty long. I was concerned when I bought that bike, but I've kind of gotten used to it. I put taller bars on it and things like that. But the for 5'7", 5'8", right in there, right? I do feel like 430 is probably the sweet spot. Definitely not 460. Definitely not 465. Last year, I had that Nuke Proof Scout. If you've been following my channel, remember it. That had a 440 millimeter reach. That bike felt long to me. Like, that felt too long. 440 felt too long. So why are bike companies making these super long front ends, and then they're recommending short people like me to be on these big stretched out bikes, right? Well, they're doing it because if you're pointed downhill, it sets you up with your front center. And I did a video last year that I'll put up in the corner up here if you want to watch all about front center, which is the measurement between the center of bottom bracket to the front axle. That video explains why they've been making the front center longer. The problem is 80-85% of us, you know, I'm in Minnesota. I'm not doing these P&W Colorado steep descents all the time. I'm doing mostly flat or rolly terrain and climbs. I'm doing a lot of jumps. And for jumping, the long front end absolutely sucks. I'll tell you that right now. A super long front end is not what you want for jumping. Maybe if you're doing 30 plus miles per hour and hitting these huge big floater gaps, which is what they're doing. Like, think Dark Fest, right? The Swatch 9s used to be the Audi 9s, you know, events like that where they just build these huge jumps and these riders are going 30 miles, 30 some miles. Now they're getting into motocross territory, right? When people are doing that, this longer slack bike geometry makes way more sense. But for all the rest of us that aren't riding that kind of terrain, it makes absolutely no sense to be riding the bikes that those guys are riding at, like the Swatch 9s, right? Or Dark Fest and those big events, you know. Even events like Red Bull Hardline, right? Like, they're doing gnarly downhill descents. Most of us are not doing that. So why are we riding bikes that are designed for that? That is my big question. I feel like the bike industry really needs to start getting away from this idea that everybody has to be on a bike that somebody's riding at, like Red Bull Hardline or Red Bull Rampage or any of these downhill events or any of these professional level enduro events, right? That most of us are not riding that terrain. If that's what you ride and you ride it a lot, by all means, get that bike that's long and slack. Just make sure you keep in mind this yank factor, because even if you have, even if you're doing steep downs, like I said, if the front end dives on you or has to go down a rock or whatever, it's going to yank you forward. I've literally seen it. Took me a while to figure out what's going on, but what I realized, and this is what happened to John, is your arms get extended and you get yanked forward. And once your body starts moving forward, it's all over. There's no going back, because now physics takes over and you're just over, right? In John's video, we watch it many times because he's so surprised that he went down. And not only is he surprised that he went down, he's surprised that he had no reaction time. Because usually, if you're going down like that, we're able to get a leg out, things like that. But literally in the video, and I'll show the video clip here in a moment, within a few frames, he's like, you could see him just before he goes out of view, he's a little sideways. And then a couple frames later, he's already on the ground. Well, what he did is on that roll, he leaned back. So he was coming up to the jump, pulling up, probably having a harder time pulling up the front end because it's long, right? And coming over that roll, right? Oh, now I'm losing balance. Coming over that roll, he leaned back, because that's what you do. BMX style, whatever. To speed jump, you get low and you get your weight back to keep the rear wheel down. But because he did that and his bike was too long, his arms got yanked. I'm on the wrong bike to sample it, right? I should have been on his bike. But the point is the same. He got yanked when the front wheel came down, because the backside of that jump dives into the berm. And his front tire went out, his weight was going forward, and he went down so fast. Like, he couldn't even think to get his leg out. His feet were still on the pedals. He's not even clipped in, right? Oh shit, you all right? Oh, not good. So that's why I'm seeing a lot of riders go down. And make comments, let me know what you think. But really think about this. Like, are you getting yanked? When you go off a jump, do your arms get fully extended on you and you just feel like you're getting pulled forward by the bike? If so, your bike is likely too big. And that can cause all kinds of problems. I really wish the bike industry, and I'm going to say this one more time, would adjust the rider height for their reach numbers. And I talk only about reach because reach is the bottom bracket to the top of the head tube. That's the standing measurement you want to have, the measurement you want to have when you're doing technical riding. Seated position, you're seated. You shouldn't be doing technical stuff while seated. You want to be down out of the saddle. So that's why this is more important than where your seat is positioned to your handlebars. So, all right. Lots going on here, but the main point is I wanted to talk about this yank factor. And once your arms get pulled to the full length, your body gets yanked forward, and then all your momentum goes forward. That's where OTBs happen and stuff. So really look at that reach number. Really pay attention it's probably the most important measurement if you're going to be doing technical riding, jumps, drops, you know, pretty gnarly descents and things like that. Even though you do want a longer front center for pointing down, you don't want this crazy yank factor at the same time. So you got to find that balance. You got to find that right thing, and it's extremely important because this is your safety. You know, if you can't control the bike and you get beyond the point of recovery, and a longer bike is going to take you beyond the point of recovery much quicker than a shorter bike, then it's not good. There you have it. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. So hit the subscribe button down there. This video is a little long, but I feel like it's really important information to provide to you if you want to be the pilot. You want to be in control of your bike. You don't want your bike making decisions for you. You don't want to be the passenger and have the bike say, you're going over the bars now, right? You can't ever 100% prevent from going over the bars. It still happens to me every once in a while. But you can certainly reduce the risk of it happening, or know that it's going to happen so you can take appropriate action. So like for me, a front end dives down on me, I know it's happening, I can throw the bike and jump off and land on my feet. I've gone over the bars many times where I've just jumped off and landed on my feet and ran out of it, and I didn't go over with the bike because I had room to be able to do that. So now I'm just kind of babbling on, but I get these thoughts to talk about while I'm concluding the video. But again, appreciate your support. Peace.